All right, get introduced to the next one. Third different candidate, third different office. I actually got to help recruit this guy to run for the 34th district, the Senate district in Georgetown, South Carolina. Y'all welcome up State Senator Stephen Goldfinch. Okay, he's coming. All right. So we designed it this way because we wanted you to hear from as many candidates. With the state Senate being called back in, that was a total surprise to us. We didn't know that that was going to happen. And I know you want to know about redistricting, but I don't think he's going to talk about redistricting here. We're going to keep him on the faith issues. But he just left the state Senate where they're going to be voting on redrawing the districts in South Carolina. How many of y'all been hearing about that in the news? It's everywhere. This guy's got a front row seat. Y'all welcome State Senator Stephen Goldfinch. You have 2 minutes to give an opening statement.
Is it okay if I stand?
Absolutely.
I've been sitting for so long with redistricting, y'all. I'm getting tired of sitting, so if you don't mind, I'm going to stand. But thank you so much for having me, and I'd like to thank Eric for allowing us to use the church. This has been amazing. So please give Eric a round of applause. Thank y'all. A little bit about me. I'm a veteran. I'm the only veteran that's running for Attorney General. I'm a military prosecutor. I've prosecuted some of the worst, including those that would threaten our national security. Also went on to advise a 2-star and a 4-star command on national security law and combat operational law when I was deployed. So I know a little bit about what's worth fighting for, y'all. In America, it's worth fighting for. This is an amazing place, and it really is. Oh, thank you very much. I'm also a conservative lawmaker. I've served in the South Carolina House, and I served in the South Carolina Senate. I'm serving there now. I have worked on projects, drafted bills, and funded things like bond reform, which ended the revolving door of bad guys getting arrested and then put right back out on the street. I helped draft and pass homicide by fentanyl. Fentanyl, y'all, is the scourge of the earth. It's killing our young folks at just a terrible rate. And we had to put an end to the folks that peddle the poison, and we did that in the South Carolina Senate. I'm proud of that. We also put a school resource officer in every single school in South Carolina. That is an amazing accomplishment for South Carolina. Thank you. And finally, I'm an entrepreneur and a businessman. I've actually signed the front of the check rather than just the back of the check. I've opened multiple successful businesses right here in South Carolina, including 2 biotech companies that we partnered with the medical university right out of Charleston. I've had great successes with those. So I would just tell you, Chad, Randy, thank you for having us. Appreciate this, appreciate the opportunity to introduce myself, and I look forward to answer some questions.
Thank you, Stephen. Y'all give him a hand for being here. We really appreciate it. You've going the extra mile, coming out of the Senate and being here. I know you're tired of sitting. Tell us about your faith journey and how it impacts your policy decisions.
Sure, yeah. I was raised in a faithful family, but I did not gain my own faith until actually I went to have y'all ever heard of Chrysalis? Anybody in here? Raise your hand if you've heard of Chrysalis. All right, good. All right, it was a Methodist project many years ago, still going to this day. But there was a man in my community named Billy Dillard. He was from Conway, South Carolina. He lost his wife to cancer about 10 years ago, 10 years prior to me getting involved in the project. And his project, his faith, and his project for his faith was, shepherding young men through high school. And y'all, it really touched me when I went to Chrysalis and I learned about my faith and earned my own faith, realized that I am a sinner that is damned other than my belief in Jesus Christ. I mean, that's it, right? I mean, and I could give you why, and I could go into, I know we're short on time here, but I could give you why. I had a lot of terrible experiences growing up through high school that put me on that path. But the bottom line is, I'm a sinner just like every single one of you, just like everybody that's out there. And I learned that depravity won't get me anywhere closer to God, that there is no way to bridge that gap other than my faith in Jesus Christ. By the way, I see Jeff sitting right here in the front row, and Jeff has been such a hero for us at the State House, praying for us and working with us on very controversial bills. So I thank you, Jeff, for all that you do for us and praying for us. But Billy Dillard, his whole entire journey and mission was to shepherd us as young kids through high school, through some of those very difficult, trying times. And he had a thing called Billy's Boys. And now we all had this thing that went on our license plate, and we all identified as Billy's Boys. And it was a Christian group, and it gave you a belonging, a sense of belonging as a teenager when it's very difficult to try to figure out where you are. Now, I'll tell you, many of us drifted away from the faith during that time period, but we always came back to Billy at his house. We met every Wednesday night at his house to talk about faith issues and to talk about the problems that are going on in our life. And today, many of my friends that drifted away from the faith have come back and have started their own Billy's Boys in Horry County. Now they're serving 300 to 400 kids every single week. So just Billy alone has produced so many faithful servants of Christ in Horry and Georgetown County, and I was proud to be a part of that. So thank you for your question.
Senator, as you know, the legalization of gambling is a subject that the General Assembly has extensively debated this past session. As Attorney General, what type of actions would you take to oppose the expansion of gambling in South Carolina?
Well, I think we have to make sure that we understand that the General Assembly has to first and foremost pass a law to either support gambling in some way, shape, or form in order for that to then be a question for the Attorney General, right? If the Attorney General, if the General Assembly doesn't pass a law, and support is sort of a loose term, but pass a law that gives further approval to the expansion of gambling, if they don't pass that law, then the Attorney General really, at that point in time has the authority to go in and to vigorously and zealously prosecute illegal gambling operations, right? Because it's still illegal at that point in time. If the General Assembly takes the extraordinary step, which I hope they don't, takes the extraordinary step of legalizing gambling, a casino or something along those lines, the Attorney General's hands are tied in many ways of having to protect and defend the law, right? And so I just want to make sure that that distinction is there. Obviously, if there's an illegal gambling operation, the Attorney General needs to be a zealous advocate for South Carolina and shutting that down, because gambling, y'all, scourge of the earth. That is where crime begins. That is where immorality and crime begins. And we have to put a stop to that in all shapes, forms, and fashions, and the expansion of that in all shapes, forms, and fashions. Thank you.
Senator, religious liberty matters to everybody here, pastors, individuals, churches. We've watched what happens when government weaponizes itself against houses of worship. How are you, as Attorney General, how are you going to stand up for religious liberty and stand up for the rights of people sitting in this audience?
Oh gosh, great question. Thank you so much. We saw this during COVID, didn't we? Terrible, terrible. My law practice today is what we call administrative and regulatory law, okay? I sue the government for a living. Y'all, I mean, that's what I do. I sue bureaucrats and the agency state for a living when they make bad and poor decisions which affect South Carolinians, like the shutting down of churches when, somebody else isn't necessarily shut down, right? Y'all, this is really a moral issue at its core, but it's also a legal issue. Whether or not the Attorney General can step in and really make an impact for churches and for faith-based groups, the answer is yes, 100%. The Attorney General needs to step into the gap, needs to put up his hand and say, no more, no more. We're not going to wind up in another situation where COVID shuts down churches and faith-based groups, but keeps the sinful groups open. Y'all, that's just, it's heresy. It's worse than heresy. It is bad news when faith-based groups are particularly oppressed, when the government puts its finger on it and says no more. That's what I do in my law practice today. I sue the agency state and put up our hand and say, no more, Mr. Big Government, no more. And I'm proud of that practice. And I always ask, just as an aside, Chad, I always ask the same question when I put a bureaucrat on the stand. Okay, and it's always this: what is it that gave you the authority to ruin this person's life? And that's a serious question, y'all, and it can apply to the church as well. What is it, Mr. Government, that gave you the authority to shut down this church? The answer almost inevitably is this, y'all: that's the way we've always done it. Y'all, that's the wrong answer. The only right answer that is out there is either statute or regulation, and a lot of the times the regulation's wrong because it doesn't comport with the statute. But that's the answer they give to why did you have the authority to ruin this person's life? That's the wrong answer. That's what I put a stop to. I can give you multiple examples of that. I know I don't have time to do that. I can give you multiple examples of how I've been successful fighting the government on behalf of the citizens of South Carolina in my law practice. But that's what I'll do for Attorney General as well. I will stand up for faith-based groups and churches like this, and I will say no to the big government that tries to shut you down. Thank you.
Throughout his tenure as Attorney General, General Wilson actively led efforts across the nation to protect life, defend religious liberty, and conscience protections. What types of actions would you take if elected as our next Attorney General?
Every and all action. I have a 100%, as you know,
Yes.
I have a 100% pro-life record. In the South Carolina House, when I served there from 2012 to 2016, and in the South Carolina Senate from 2016 to today, I have a 100% pro-life record, and I'm proud of that, and I would defend that as Attorney General. South Carolina is a conservative state. We are, y'all. I mean, I know that we have our own little family disagreements sometimes over what's right and, how far should we go in this direction, and those are valid debates, and we should have those debates, okay? I have no dispute over that. We should have those debates. But at the end of the day, it's the Attorney General's office. It's the Attorney General's duty to stand up for the law of South Carolina. The law of South Carolina is very pro-life. You have to have an Attorney General that knows what he or she's doing, can go to the U.S. Supreme Court, the highest court in the land, and can fight for our state's rights, 10th Amendment, even though it does, in this case, happen to be something as morally important as pro-life issues. That's what I do every single day, y'all, in my law practice. I fight the government on behalf of the citizens of South Carolina. I am the only one, I believe, I don't want to say for sure, I believe I'm the only one that's actually licensed at the Supreme Court. I am the only one that I know of that goes to the Supreme Court and fights on behalf of the citizens of South Carolina against the government. God forbid, I know this is not a partisan group, maybe, but God forbid we wind up with a Gavin Newsom or a Kamala Harris in 2028. Y'all, they're coming after us. They're coming after our faith-based groups. They're coming after our 10th Amendment rights right here in South Carolina. They're coming after our pro-life laws. They're coming after our Second Amendment protections. And we have to have an Attorney General that has been there and done that, and I have, and I think that's a good investment for South Carolina. And I would love to represent you as Attorney General. Thank you.
Senator, a lot of discussion on the issue of judges. In the Palmetto Family Council survey, you said that's not the best way to do it by popular vote.
Yeah.
What's the best way to elect judges in South Carolina? And then how do you lead the legislature as the Attorney General in South Carolina on that issue?
Sure. To begin with, let me just paint a picture of what I believe popular elections look like, okay? If you've ever seen the drug dealer on the corner, that's the perfect guy to get campaign finance from for the judge that he's about to appear in front of. If you've ever seen the white-collar criminal arrested, on the front page, his mugshot for embezzling $1 million from his accounting firm, y'all, that's the perfect guy to get your campaign finance from for the judge that he's going to appear in front of. Now, you may say, that's not going to happen, but you know what? Now you're thinking about it, aren't you? We have to have trust in our institutions. Now, you don't necessarily have to have as much trust in the executive. You don't have to have as much trust in the legislative branch. Like, everybody hates the legislature, right? It's natural, right? I even hate the legislature. I mean, it's just natural, right? It's frustrating. It's difficult. That's the way it works. But you have to have trust in your judiciary. If you don't have trust in your judiciary, that's the seeds of a revolution, y'all. I mean, it really is that important. So to answer your question directly, what's the best way? I think the best way is probably closer to the federal model than where we are now. The federal model, the executive, or, in our case, it would be the governor, right? The governor would nominate judges, and then the Senate would appoint. That's probably the closest thing to the federal model that really makes sense to me, works well. I'm also not a fan of, by the way, direct governor appointment, gubernatorial appointments. I always like to tell people this when they ask about why not just let the governor appoint them. I always say, well, you may not know who you're voting for governor today, but I bet you most of you know who you're not voting for. Right? You got somebody in mind? Everybody in here got somebody in mind you're not going to vote for governor, right? You okay if he or she picks all the judges in South Carolina? The answer is no, absolutely not. So I think the federal model is probably the best system.
Alliance Defending Freedom gives South Carolina an F when it comes to the issue of parental rights. This year, the House overwhelmingly passed the Parental Rights Act. However, the bill failed to get a hearing in the Senate Education Committee. With you being a parent and possibly our next Attorney General, how important is this issue to you, and what steps would you take to protect parental rights?
Very important to me. Y'all, in my Senate capacity, a few years ago, I got very involved in education. I'm not on the education committee, but I got very involved in education because I have a neighbor who's got a kid that has severe dyslexia, dyscalculia. I'm not going to call his name, but he is approximately 3 grade levels behind now in Georgetown County. 3 grade levels behind. What are they going to do with him this year? Are they going to push him forward? Are they going to hold him back again and be 4 grade levels behind? Is he going to be in kindergarten and be 10 years old? Y'all, this is a real problem, and I started getting involved in this a couple years ago. I sat in IEP meetings. Y'all know what IEP meetings are? I know I see a bunch of moms shaking their heads in here because moms know, right? Moms know all about this. IEP meetings are where a kid, it's an individualized educational plan, where a kid with issues, maybe dyslexia, dyscalculia, for instance, has to sit in front of a panel and they evaluate what's right and what they should do and how this education plan can be tailored for this specific kid. And I sat there one day in a meeting, in an IEP. I started going to a lot of IEP meetings. I sat there in a meeting one day, and the parents had been paying approximately $1,500 a month to send their kid to tutoring because the school didn't have a resource teacher that could teach a dyslexic or dyscalculia kid. That's not a free and adequate public education, is it? That's the law, free and adequate public education in South Carolina. That's what they have to provide. But the school wasn't doing that because they didn't have a teacher that could teach a dyslexic kid. So the parents paid $1,500 a month to send their kids to tutoring. And the parents said, would the school consider paying for tutoring? And the IEP administrator said no. And the parents said, would you consider allowing the tutor to come into the school so that we don't have to take 3 hours of our day to come pick up our child and take him to the tutor and take him back to the school and then go back to work? And the IEP administrator said no. And the IEP administrator finally looked at us and she said, I'll tell you what. I see that his grades have been increasing. His scores, test scores have been increasing. If you'll consider taking him out of tutoring for the next year and prove to us that it's the tutor that's improving his grade scores rather than us, we'll consider your requests. Y'all, I was disgusted, and I know Ellen Weaver's disgusted. I can see her shaking her head. Y'all, I was disgusted by that. To suggest that we should harm this little boy because, why? Because they're having some kind of a vested interest in this broken system that she's living in. Y'all, we need parental choice. We need educational choice. We need protections for our kids. And moms, y'all, dads too, but moms especially, you have a right to how your child's educated. An absolute right to how your child is educated. And as Attorney General, if I see a school or a school district that I believe is violating faith, violating the law, not teaching our kids the way they're supposed to, maybe even have books that they're not supposed to, I am going to instruct our opinions division at the Attorney General's office, put a stop to that nonsense immediately. Immediately.
Y'all give Stephen a hand. One of these is working. Here we go. Y'all give Stephen a hand. I really, really appreciate you coming from the Senate. I really do. You have a minute to close and make your final pitch.
Thank you so much. Real fast. I like to tell this story because it means a lot to me. And I'll try to do it real fast, Chad. But when I was deployed in North Africa in a combat zone, and I was wounded. It wasn't a combat injury. I wasn't shot or anything. I fell in a bunker, and I hyperextended my shoulder, and I tore my pec and my rotator and my labrum. Nasty injury, but not an emergent injury. So they stuck me on an airfield between Mogadishu and Djibouti called Tchibeli. Anybody ever been deployed in Africa? Oh, my man, back in the back. Thank you for your service. Appreciate that. It's hot, y'all, 130 degrees. I got a case of water, some MREs. I'm sitting there. You're going to get picked up by the C-17 soon. A week goes by. Finally, C-17 shows up. I had a lot of time to think about where I was and where I came from. A week goes by. C-17 lands. Nurse, 2 pilots come out. They greet me. They start an IV. And I got to talking to the pilot. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I got to talking to the pilot. And I said, your accent sounds familiar. And he said, I'm from Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. And they put the IV in me and they took me in the back of the plane. And the last thing I saw about North Africa was the tail fin of that C-17. And it had a Palmetto flag painted on it. It had flown out of Joint Base Charleston to come pick me up. Y'all, South Carolina is an amazing place to live and work. Thank you. It is an amazing place to live and work and raise a family. I mean, it is so amazing. And it is worth fighting for. It is worth fighting a war for. And I have done that. I've been there and done that. And I'm so proud to have served. But it's worth continuing to fight. I still have a debt to pay to America and to South Carolina. This is how I want to pay this debt. I want to serve as your next Attorney General. I think I can do a good job, and I would be honored to have your vote on June 9th. Thank you so much.
Y'all give Stephen Goldfinch a hand.